Hi, everybody, and good morning here from Finland. Um, it's we're continuing with our glamour work, Dissipation of Glamour Initiative, which Tuija and Olivia Hansen and I are putting together as part of the general approach to the necessity of dealing with this difficult subject. As some of you are aware, the world is rapidly changing, and yesterday, Great Britain voted to leave the European Union, which is, however you may view that, it's going to be a tremendous change in relations, not only here in Europe, but globally, and may lead to the to division, further division, and perhaps disintegration in some of these efforts to create union under the avatar of synthesis and under Master R, who is the regent of Europe and also the regent of the United States. So, Great Britain, United Kingdom, has a Ray 1 personality and a Ray 2 soul. In this particular case, the go it alone first Ray appears to be winning the battle, and I think that the forces of obstruction are working against cooperation, and they seek for division. So we have our hands full, those of us who are aspirants and disciples of the ageless wisdom. We are working towards the right kind of union. Of course, there can be unions which are totalitarian and oppressive, and that's not what we work for, but we work for variety within unity, so that all of the soul rays of the nations may be strengthened and may emerge, and yet a unity and even eventually a synthesis may prevail. So, let's just say that we do have the great beings. The avatar of synthesis is overshadowing our planetary logos at this time, working towards the unities which must prevail during the Aquarian Age, and there will be setbacks and readjustments. I'm not saying that everything was perfect with the European Union, but the whole idea of unity is one of our major objectives. So when we work in this glamour work, it's so often dealing with separation, the great heresy of separativeness or separateness, however you want to call it. Master DK says it is the one great heresy, the one great distortion of thought. And of course it's based upon our own misidentification of what we are. We think we are the isolated personality, and then we have isolated communities and isolated nations as a result of our own projection of our isolated identity upon the larger structures. So we have to work for the right kind of unitiveness based upon goodwill, love in action, clear mind, and the willingness to do what is good for the greatest number, the greatest good of the greatest number. So what I have thought about doing here is to actually study this book quite carefully. It was these glamour essays were written over a period of time, and for the sake of a group of 9 people that were a kind of seed group that the Tibetan was training, it's very deep stuff. And, so we'll create kind of a study group for a few paragraphs every time we meet, which thus far is on a weekly basis as much as possible. And so we'll discuss these things, what they mean to us, and we'll, pick and choose. I'm not going to begin at the very beginning of the book, but go around to different areas of the book, and we will always have a short meditation at this point on the dissipation of individual glamour, and then we'll see when we can begin our work with the attempt to dissipate world group and world glamour. Obviously one has to keep looking at one's own malfunctions and dealing with them if one is going to be of any use in the larger sense. So let's see what I'm going to do here. Let's see, Tuija and Olivia, who are my partners in this. I'm going to transfer you, Tuija, over to the organizer area, and when Olivia comes, I'm not sure she can come today, I'll do the same, and that will mean that you can speak when you wish to, rather than worrying about recognition. Now, sometimes we will have a little some in the Finnish language, but for our major discussions we will necessarily have to confine ourselves to English, because it gets pretty involved and difficult to really, translate on the spot. So I looked this morning at what we could possibly do, and I settled on looking at the three kinds of techniques that we will be utilizing as we become more and more proficient in what is offered in this book. And our study over the years will not only be on glamour, but also on illusion as well, and also dealing to an extent with the dispersing of Maya. All these three can be called, the three together can be called Maya, the three together can be called glamour, the three together can be called illusion. There's a lot of imprecise use of the words, but DK has differentiated them: illusion in relation to the mental plane, glamour in relation to the emotional plane, by far the strongest and most difficult, and then Maya in relation to the etheric physical level. So we will study all these things carefully at a time when spiritually occult intervention on a subjective level is needed in the world very much. So, this may not be for everybody, but we can train ourselves to be part of what's called the trained observers, the second seed group. We can train ourselves to see more clearly, act better in relation to the plan, and help other people see more clearly as well. So our first work here will be a little bit of study. Then today we might look at Ray 3 glamours. We'll go down the list, and whatever discussion we will have will be in relation to the text that we are looking at. You can either raise your hand and say something when I call upon you, or you can write a question to Brett. He will get it, and he will let me know, and then we'll try to address what your question will be. All of this is for the long term. As you know, here from our area of work here in Finland and from the Temple of Silence, we have an Ask project going. Ask and you shall receive, seek and you shall find, knock and it shall be opened unto you. And we're trying to be somewhat comprehensive about this. The triangles work, which is vitally important, and I hope we are all at least involved in one triangle and expanding that. We do that on Wednesday. Tuija leads that broadcast. Then on Thursday, we do the reappearance of the Christ, meditation, the Tibetan Give. On Friday is our glamour webinar. It's more a webinar for discussion. The others are broadcasts. Tomorrow, because it is midsummer up here in the north, everything kind of shuts down. We're not going to be doing the usual invoking of the souls of nations, But we will continue with that the next week. That's every Saturday, and every Sunday again will be the invoking of money for hierarchical purposes, the Tibetans' money meditation. So those are the 5 things we'll be doing, but this particular weekend we will not be doing that because of conditions here in the north. And then, we have a couple of so-called free days, and we will, from time to time, do some other types of meditations, and we'll let you know about that on a special basis when they come. But it's a pretty full meditation schedule. It's 5 days a week. And, you're most welcome to join us at and maybe, Brett, you would be willing to find and put into the chat box the Ask link. We have a comprehensive link that's good for all the broadcasts of the Ask program. And that should make things easier for us, so we don't have to worry about all the different links for each different program. But, excuse me, I'm sorry for the static here. But when it comes to the webinars for the time being, we may do glamour broadcasts in the future, but when it comes to the webinars, we will send out the link for that, and we have already sent out a link which is good not only for this webinar, but for the next 3 webinars. We've been changing from AM, PM, AM, PM. We're now on the AM schedule here in GMT, and that's to allow people, different people have different availability around the globe. Now, right now, it's kind of like 1 o'clock in the morning on the East Coast, and maybe we have a couple of people. And it's better for Australia and better for Europe and so forth. But then we go to the PM time the next week, and it's better for other people. And all of this will be posted on the Makara website, and Brett will send out, where you can reach that. All right, friends, let's just have a slight alignment before we get into the work here, the discussion. And we, some almost 30 of us here, we're linked with each other for the purpose of understanding how to clarify consciousness and escape from the ancient glamours, which DK, as he'll tell us, have been with us a long time. They're so difficult to see. They've been with us forever, it seems, and ever since Atlantean days, and we're now extricating ourselves from the snare of these wrong attractions and wrong identifications. We're concentrating on glamour first, and later on illusion. So we're working together, and we're working in our daily lives to identify what tendencies are holding us back from full spiritual functioning, what glamorous tendencies there are, and each one of us is identifying these things in our own lives. So first we're working on the individual glamour. And we've been reviewing them. We've reviewed glamours 1 and 2. As DK says, the name of glamours is legion. There's so many of them, and they're kind of unique to every person. But he's given us a way of thinking about them, identifying some of the major ones. Okay. So we work together, responsive to the soul. And we work as much as possible from the plane of mind, because we have to have that kind of perspective. We have to be able to look at things from a clear mental perspective. There's a lot of fifth ray in this work, and you know how the Ajna center is used as the beam of light and so forth. It's a fifth ray center in many respects. So we need this objective, clear thinking fifth ray to understand the kind of work we're called upon to do. Okay. Now, there are three techniques that are given in this book, and we at first are working a lot with what's called the technique of light, but let's today review, or look for the first time, as it were, at the three techniques and what they are meant to accomplish, and then if you have thoughts or questions, we can discuss them. I don't pretend for a moment to know everything in this book. I mean, like I said, I used to think I knew 3% of what the Tibetan wrote, and now I'm down to about 0.5%. It's just a tremendous outpouring of great hierarchical knowledge. So a lifetime of study, and goes deeper all the time. So anyway, the very first technique, he summarizes these. He calls it the technique of the presence. I think what we'll do is we'll read through the three techniques, and then we'll see if we have any thoughts or comments on them, any questions about them that we can explore together. And maybe what I'll do is make them a little smaller here, so it's possible to have all of them on the page at the same time. Hopefully they don't get too small, and that you can read them. Oh, there they are. The technique of the presence. By means of this technique, the soul assumes control of the integrated personality and of its relations, horizontal and vertical. The technique involves the unfolding of the flower of the intuition, dispelling illusion. Now remember, illusion is dispelled, glamour is dissipated, and Maya is dispersed. I'm not sure that all these words are here, but those are the words that we want to remember. The dispelling of illusion, the dissipating of glamour, the dispersal of Maya. DK is a great teacher, and he gives us certain mnemonics, certain words, usually beginning with the same letter, that help us remember the system. So it's dispelling, dissipating, and dispersing. Okay, so this technique, and it's a high technique, and we're not going to get into it immediately, because we have to work with some of the other techniques first the technique of light, but this gives us kind of an overview, and we're going to examine these things academically, and then we will also work practically. We'll also work practically as we go. So, this technique involves the unfolding of the flower of the intuition. And where does that come from? From the synthesis petals of the egoic lotus, and from the Buddhic plane, and also maybe from one of the sacrifice petals of the egoic lotus. So the true intuition is found in the level of the spiritual triad on the Buddhic plane. So we have to remember, where these things come from. Revealing the angel of the presence, the solar angel, and that part of the solar angel that is within our egoic lotus, because It is an independent being, indicating the presence. Now, the presence ultimately is you as a unit of being. It's you as a spirit. It's you as a monad. It is the highest part of your nature. So when you think presence, you might think the presence of God, but that's really the same as the monadic part of your nature. So dispelling illusion, revealing the angel, indicating the presence, and opening up to the disciple the world of ideas and the door of the higher initiations from the third initiation on. And the world of ideas, that is the realm of the spiritual triad. Now, if I was going to look at a picture here, this world of ideas is occurring on the four higher systemic planes of the cosmic physical plane. So it begins here on the intuitional plane, but it continues upward, and ideas are the great organizing principles of our cosmos. And in a way, every one of us is an idea. Ideas are really beings, actually. So ideas are not thoughts. That's the thing we've got to get in mind, that an idea is represented by the kinds of thoughts that we can formulate, but usually our thoughts do not grasp this incorporeal, without normal body, incorporeal being we call an idea. So we're going into the world of ideas with this technique of the presence. Opening up the disciple to the world of ideas and the door of higher initiations. Of course, most of us, let's just say that many people in the world have taken the first initiation. Not all, of course, but they have the birth of the Christ in the heart, and they're working on clarifying their emotional nature, which means, working on the themes of the second initiation so that they can have an illumined mind and spiritual intelligence. And those two things are the gifts or the achievements of the second initiation. And this takes a long time, okay? Through the disciples' grasp and application of these divine ideas, or seed thoughts, isn't that interesting? That he calls seed thoughts and ideas the same. He becomes initiate, a true initiate. And the third initiation becomes possible as an immediate goal. So the technique of the presence, if rightly used, is going to lead towards the third initiation. So many of us would be well to take the second initiation, which is one of the hardest to take if your prominent rays are 2, 4, or 6. So he becomes an initiate, and that's the third degree. The intuition, now look at this is very interesting. The intuition is called the applied power of transfiguration, and it's going to take you above the normal forms and figures into a new world of subtler forms and subtler relationships. The world of transfiguration begins on the higher mental plane and goes beyond that. The technique is related to the little-known yoga called Agni Yoga, or the Yoga of Fire, about which Master Moria, through his amanuensis, Madame Helena Roerich, has written a great deal, and some of you have run into these wonderful Agni Yoga books. They're very different in a way from the Tibetans' writing. Okay, so maybe I've spoken quite a bit about that. Are there any questions about this particular paragraph? Any thoughts related to it? Yes, go ahead. Someone is
Michael,
on. Yeah, go ahead, Tuija.
Michael, I am on. This is Tuija. Just a little note about when we are thinking about dispelling illusion and that process. Also, the angel is changing. So the angel with the flaming sword is changing into the angel of presence. Can you say into the angel of presence, or the influence of angels of presence?
The angel of the presence actually opens. There's some wonderful paragraphs. We'll have to get into that. There's 7 paragraphs from the old commentary about what the angel of the presence does to introduce you to the higher part of your nature, which is the presence. And one of the most glorious sections from the old commentary is on the 5th ray. The sort of 5th ray soul, once it has, achieved a degree of elevation, is so connected with the angel of the presence, and how that angel opens the door for the presence to really come in. From my understanding, it's not an easy subject, but the angel of the presence, to me, is as much of the great solar angel as can infuse the egoic lotus as an intelligence, as a presence. I think there's more to the solar angel than can ever fit into the egoic lotus, okay, so to speak, because this is a huge initiate who is a member of the council within of the solar logos. Yes, go ahead. Okay.
Yes, that was exactly about that the angel, the solar angel, cannot fit. It is a part of him who is preparing the way for us for the higher worlds. But that is just a note about that it is interesting how the angel with the flaming sword is standing first for the higher mental plane, but then when the process goes further, and in that dispelling illusion process, the angel of the presence will take over.
Yes, and that angel of the presence is the one that really, with us, is quite intimate to lead us into the monad. Take a look at this now. One day we'll go over this. This is about the this is a stanza on the blessed ones, who are really the monad in a way. But take a look at this 5th ray statement here. It's a fantastic statement, and it says, this is for the 5th ray soul. The word for him came forth in triple form. His mind responded to the vision clear evoked. The truth lies hidden in the unknown way. The angel of the presence guards that way. This is the way to the spirit, right? The mind reveals the angel and the door. Stand in the presence, lift up thine eyes, enter through that golden door. And this applies really in a way to all of us as souls, but the 5th ray has a peculiarly intimate connection with the process. Enter through that golden door. Thus will the angel, who is the shadow of the Blessed One, reveal the open door. That angel too must disappear. The Blessed One remains and passes through that door into the light sublime. So, we'll take up these wonderful stanzas too. They are related to the glamour work, and if you're interested, on the Makara website, I have done commentaries on all of video commentaries on all of these stanzas, so it'll give you kind of an idea. And there's others, angel of the presence commentaries, which teach us how to take the 3rd initiation. It's so interesting what Master DK has packed into that little book. It's not a little book, it's 700-something pages, Esoteric Psychology Volume 2. He has given us hints which take us very, very far into the initiatory process. Okay, so just to familiarize you with that beautiful idea about the angel and the presence and so forth. Are there any questions at this point, or We could go on, I suppose, to the technique of light. These are all that I'm going to deal with right this morning here. There's a lot to work on, and it's going to take us years if we study very, very carefully, and hopefully we will become better at dispelling glamour in our own lives and together work at helping the world situation. And it's going to need it very much, because the glamours are going to be very, very thick for the next number of years, and that will be the purpose of the counter force, that they call them by a nice name, the forces of obstruction. Glamour is a very, very big obstruction to clear consciousness, and these forces are going to be working to thicken the glamour in which people live, and groups like ours have to do the best we can to dissipate these things using the ancient occult techniques. Okay, well, let me go on then. That's what I'll do. And to the technique of light, this is just, an introduction. And we're going to use a lot of the technique of light. Okay. So that's more focused, more around the second initiation and so forth. The technique of light. By means of this technique, the illumined mind assumes control over the astral or emotional body and dissipates glamour. Now, some of you may have the Scorpio energy. It's not only associated with the emotional body, it's associated with the powers of mind and of Mercury, which can clearly bring in the dissipation of glamour. And in the 5 meditative techniques that work, with Leo as concentration, Virgo as meditation, Libra as contemplation, when you come to Scorpio, it is illumination. And that's what we're talking about here. The big fight with glamour is done through illumination. And that has a strong Scorpio content to it. So we're going to assume control over the emotional body using the 5th ray, using Mercury, and dissipate glamour. When light pours in, glamour fades out. And from a larger perspective, when light pours in, the Black Lodge fades out of its effect upon our planet, which is hardly yet the case. When light pours in, glamour fades out. Illumination dominates, and the vision of reality can be seen. Now, what is reality for us? There are various grades of reality, obviously, and, even to get into the realm of soul, light, and love, and sacrificial will, that is a higher reality. This technique is related to Raja Yoga. And Alice Bailey gave that wonderful book. The Tibetan gave her the stanzas from Patanjali, translating them, and it's The Light of the Soul. It's a Raja Yoga book. This technique is related to Raja Yoga, and its goal is the second initiation, where you have the illumined mind and spiritual intelligence. Those are the 2 qualities of the second initiation, whereas intuitive instinct is the quality of the 3rd initiation, and spiritual instinct the quality of the 1st initiation. So this technique produces the ability to tread the path of discipleship and enables the man to, quote, live a life enlightened by divinity. And then he gives that summary statement: illumination is the applied power of transformation. See, transfiguration relates to the mind. Transformation relates to the emotional body particularly, which has to be conquered at the 2nd degree. And then transmutation refers to the etheric physical nature, but here he calls it by the name of transmission. I'll go on and read the next part, and then we'll see if there are any thoughts or questions about this yet. And then maybe we'll take a quick look at the 3rd ray glamours before we get into an increasingly abbreviated version of the meditation we're using. Now, DK told us these meditations can be done in 10 or 15 minutes, or even maybe less. So it's very full in the beginning, and I trust you are all reading the book. Either buy the book or get the Alice Bailey CD-ROM and read those sections so you can be informed. Now, the next one is called the Technique of Indifference. And remember how he tells us that it's a bigger thing than just this. We have to have a certain divine indifference to what goes on in the personality. He says such a drastic thing that not one thing that arises in the emotional nature makes any difference whatsoever. Now you can say, well, how can that be? That's a long way ahead. But he really expects that of us. Nothing that arises there makes the slightest difference at all to our functioning. And then we have achieved divine indifference and a real, not just a theoretical detachment. And I wonder how many of us can do that. Maybe on a good day, right? Okay, so the technique of indifference. By means of this technique, Maya is ended. Technically, Maya. For the control of the purified astral vehicle is consciously and technically brought into activity, producing the freeing of the energies of the etheric body from the control of matter or force substance. Now, DK has almost a humorous definition of Maya. He calls it that unthinking emotional mess. That unthinking emotional mess. So anyway, the energies are brought under control, freeing the etheric body from the control, the impulses of instinct, of matter, of force substance, and bringing men in large number onto the probationary path, where there is divine indifference to the call or pull of matter. Like DK says, a certain don't care attitude. This will go far in liberating us. A certain don't care. He asks us to cultivate this. Where there is divine indifference to the call or pull of matter, then inspiration becomes possible. This technique is related to karma yoga, the yoga of right action on the physical plane, is related to karma yoga in its most practical form, and the use of matter with complete impersonality, meaning we don't want it for ourselves, we use it for the higher purpose, for the divine plan. The goal of this technique is the first initiation, which enables man to, quote, live a life inspired by God. Inspiration is the applied power of transmission. Well, usually he uses the word transmutation. In this case, another T, transmission of the higher through the etheric body in the right type of form, and not misled by all those impulses which come to us from the instinctual, physical, elemental nature. Okay, so this is what we're going to look at here today, just a little bit. We don't have to be exhaustive about it. Are there any thoughts or questions that you would like to express in relation to this overview of the three techniques? I'm looking for your hands if you want to say something or write a question to Brett, whatever. I'm not saying I can necessarily answer everything or that any of us can, but we're studying these things together, and it's very important in today's chaotic, glamorous, illusion-bound world. See, all of this material, and there's quite a bit of it here, it goes on, for another 50 pages, is just an introduction to using the technique we're already using, which is the formula for the dissipation of glamour on an individual basis. So we want to be practical and work together at finding our own glamours and using the occult techniques to dissipate them. And we also want to be academic and read the subject so we develop a fuller understanding of what we are doing. And this will take time. Look, the Tibetan organized a number of groups of 9 people. He organized first a telepathic group of 9 people. They were, supposed to receive the divine plan with as much clarity as possible. The next group was the trained observers, the dissipators of glamour, working along the 2-4-6 line very much. The next group he organized was the healing group, another group of 9, healing in all levels of the personality, not just the physical etheric, but emotional healing, mental healing too. We don't think about those so much. Then there was the education group. That was number 4. And, of course, the book Education in the New Age was brought forward in relation to that group. And then he had to stop. The groups weren't responding well enough. The Second World War was going. He only got 3 people involved in the group of political workers, not 9. And the other groups for the New World Religion and the science group and the the psychologists and then the economists and then the magical workers, those groups could not be organized. So he had to change his plan. But we have enough, because of his books, to deal with the glamour work. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, Michael, we have a question from Celeste.
Yeah.
Is the formula we are using so far here named Technique of Light?
Yes, it's related to the Technique of Light. It's for the formula for the dissipation of individual glamour, and it is definitely in relation to the Technique of Light, because that's what we're doing. We are generating the light from within ourselves, from within the soul, a great station of light on the mental plane, and we are projecting it into the astral plane. This is an aspect of the Technique of Light. That is correct. We will also, as we go on, now look, in the Moria Federation, we have various meditations, and we have some meditations on the technique of the presence, I believe, or did I just do that for the faculty? I'm trying to remember. But anyway, we have a full study of these things. But we're going to be studying these things together in quite great depth. First, we're going to use the light. The technique of the presence may be a little bit beyond us, but we'll get into that as well. I devised a meditation for that, but not now. First, let's use the technique of light and use the light to dissipate as much individual glamour as we can. Right. Okay, anything else there? It's a great study, and it's a very practical work, and it will require occult training on the part of everybody. Now, you can't just waltz into these things and say, okay, well, now I'm going to dissipate glamour on a large basis, because all of us are riddled with these wrong, distorted, emotional, desirous responses built into our nature over many, many lives. And we don't see them. We don't see them. And we have to learn to be the divine observers and really learn to see. So this is going to take some work, and you'll have to, as we go along, you'll have to see whether your rays are such that, this microphone, your rays are such that they really interest, this kind of work really interests you. If you have a measure of the 6th ray and the 2nd ray in your makeup, and I guess most of us gathered around the Tibetan's writings, we do, then this kind of work can be undertaken with a degree of success. As I said before, out of those groups of 9 people that the Tibetan was using as trained observers and dissipators of glamours, they all had a powerful 6th ray somewhere. And it not necessarily personality or soul, it could have even been in their astral body. But they had enough to give them rapport with this level of the astral plane to be able to do this work. Okay. Anything else here that you want to mention, question, or discuss before we move on to just a cataloging of some interesting third-ray glamours? We're just kind of going through the glamours that DK listed by the rays, and we'll see whether they are of interest to us. Okay, I'm trying to, I have a microphone which I spent a lot of money on it, but it's letting me down. Maybe I sat on it one fine day or something. Okay. Right, well then if not, Brett, do you hear me okay?
Yes, you're fine.
Okay, fine. Because now I'm trying to put this microphone in a position where it won't make that static ridden noise. All right. Well, just review this. Just review this, and we'll have more to say about it as we go along. Now, the glamours of the third ray, and for those people who are Finnish, whoa, I thought I had that here. Oh, here it is. There it is. There's a Finnish translation there as well, and we have a few Finnish people with us. So, but we're conducting at least the academic part mostly in English. The third ray of activity, of abstract in mind, and of, DK says, I have a name for this ray, which I like the most. He says, I call it the ray of creative intelligence. So, I think it has more dignity and gives you an idea of the creativity in relation to the divine plan, which is necessarily expressed on this ray. So this is the ray associated with the personality in a generic sense. For instance, if the first ray generically is associated with the will of the monad, the second ray with the nature of the soul, the third ray with matter and with the personality and with intelligence in general. Now, those are generic associations. They are not, we all have all different rays of personality and of soul and of monad and so forth, 7 possibilities, but characterizing the general function of those levels are the first, second, and third ray. And interestingly enough, right here on planet Earth, it works out beautifully. And in a difficult manner as well, because the personality ray of our planetary logos of the Earth is the third ray, the soul ray is the second ray, and you guessed it, the monadic ray of our Earth is the first ray. So we're really the only 1, 2, 3 planet in our solar system in terms of the rays. So anyway, here we, I think some of these are pretty straightforward and pretty obvious, but just check yourself out and see whether they relate to you. You have to find your own malfunctions. Now, people will be pointing them out to you, for sure. Your friends, your near ones, your close relations. Why do you have to be like that, So, reports about your glamours are liable to come from a friendly voice near you, but then you begin to see it yourself and you say, oh, was I doing that, and did I have that attitude? Because attitude is a big word when it comes to glamour. It's a readiness to respond in a certain emotional way. It's a predisposition to respond in a way that's generally not helpful for unity between people, and it's generally not helpful for bringing through the perspective of the soul. It distorts the vision, basically, is what we're talking about. So one of these glamours, the glamour of being busy. Well, it's like Descartes says, I think, therefore I am. He had a lot of third ray, but it's like I move, therefore I am. When I'm running around, I must be accomplishing something. even if it's really not needed, and oftentimes it deflects the real contact with the inner source, which should be motivating the action on the physical plane. So it's like people can't sit still, you know. Stillness is one of the big things that is given for the integration of the third-rate type, third-rate soul, third-rate personality, and be still is what the soul says, because otherwise you deflect the power and perspective of the soul through constant movement on the outer levels. This is an interesting one here. As I say, the Finnish translation is here for those of you that can benefit from that. The glamour of cooperation with the plan in an individual and not a group way. There's a tendency, you know, to pull back from the group using this hard line ray, which is the third ray, and we know that response to group vibration is so very important. It is found on the second subplane of the mental plane. Well, a group cooperation is not so easy necessarily for third-rate types. They think they're smarter, they think they know more, they want to do it in their own way, and they don't want to slow down so that the group can make its own type of decision. So, you know, you've got intelligent methods here, but it's the whole idea of how the group as a whole will function that ultimately is more important, because we've entered the era of group initiation. So, you know, this ray, being on the 1357 line, can be quite separative, and this is, you might call it by a funny name, you know, you might call it separative cooperation. And I've seen it operating, you know, in quite a few types that have a strong third ray. The glamour of active scheming. Well, you know, the personality is always looking for its own advantage. So oftentimes in a secretive kind of way, you work by planning for your own fulfillment of your own desires, regardless of what might be best for other people. So you always are having a trap here so that you can get your own way, and other people may not even know you're doing this. You're thinking many, many steps ahead about how to achieve your own goals and not group goals. It's not very altruistic. This next one is interesting. The glamour of creative work without true motive. Well, it's a very intelligent ray, but there's not a real alignment here with the kinds of things that have to come through from the soul. So you manipulate a lot of things and you call it creativity. So, you know, the true artist is a meditator who brings through impression about what the divine plan needs. But the third-rate type can throw a lot of things together in new and different ways, from personality motive or from no real motive at all. Just make combinations, because this ray is really good at making combinations of things without the guidance of the soul. So, you know, you sometimes see that, I sometimes see that in music. You know, I'm involved in music quite a bit, and I see that when the third ray is active, the person can put together a lot of combinations of notes, let us say. But these combinations do not reflect the beauty of the soul. And you kind of wonder where they're going. They just seem to wander. This is the ray of wandering, you know, and sometimes it really gets off the track. Remember, earlier we discussed how a heavy sixth ray and a heavy third ray are quite conducive to a general glamorous response. The glamour of good intentions, which are basically selfish. Well, there's often an ulterior motive with the third-rate type. It's got its own plans and desires, and the welfare of others is not really being assisted. So, you know, you'd like to do that, but you know the old saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So you're fooling yourself here. These intentions are good, but you're not willing to follow through in the practical action that it takes to really make them happen. You have deceived yourself somehow. You think you want the good for others or for the situation, but basically you're also fulfilling your own motives. So self-serving motives for doing apparently good things. We talked about that before. You give a lot of money, let's say, to a charity, and then that charity really recognizes you, and the reason you've been doing it all along is so you can be recognized. The glamour of the spider at the center. Well, this is interesting. You manipulate everything, you handle all things. You're the one that everybody has to come to because you know. And you don't give other people the chance to do their thing, you do it for them. And also, you gain power over others by, just like the spider does, it lays a trap for those who wander into the web. So it's not such a nice thing. It's a very manipulative and busybody kind of thing, and ensnaring other people in your web. Now this is maybe, I don't know, did I talk about this before? It feels like I did. But anyway, the glamour of God in the machine. There's something here called Deus ex machina, God from the machine. And basically, in the old operas, everybody would get into a big mess, and nobody knew how to resolve anything, and then suddenly, from above the stage would come down a kind of chariot or a machine, and a god would be in that machine, and would sort out everything and make everything right for everybody, manipulating the whole situation so it all worked out for the good. Well, I can handle everything, just leave it to me, and that takes away other people's ability to resolve issues for themselves. This is an obvious one, the glamour of devious, nobody sees it happening, the glamour of devious and continuous manipulation. So you've got a plan, and you arrange everything, and this might be called, and I think we're familiar with this, it's called the pulling of strings behind the scenes. So, it's the old thing like in politics, you want to know what's really going on. Some people have said, well, follow the money if you want to know what's really going on, because behind the scenes, people are pulling the strings, and it's very difficult to know why they're doing that or to see them do it. Excuse me. Now, the Black Lodge itself, what I've been able to conclude, has a lot of people in it that are third-ray monads, and they have first-ray souls. And the dangerous thing about this group is you don't see what they're doing. Things are working out badly on the physical plane, and it's oftentimes because this particular group is manipulating energies behind the scenes which force things to work out the way they want them to, and it's not for the good of the whole at all, it's for their own good. So, the Black Lodge and their servants are operating through devious, you don't see it, and continuous, all the time activity, manipulation, arranging this and that, so everything works out for selfish motive. And then finally we have the last glamour here that he mentions, the glamour of self-importance from the standpoint of knowing and of efficiency. Well, this is the know-it-all. That's all I can say. Come to me, I'll solve all things. I know everything, you know nothing. Let me handle this, and people need to stand up on their own and have the solution in their own hands, and basically you keep it all in your hands, okay? So that's not, I think we can see the tendency here, and of course there would be many more as well. There's a dishonesty problem with this particular ray, and a realization that if you operate behind the scenes and nobody sees what you're doing, then you can get your way and nobody's going to stand in your way. There are problems here. And of course, sometimes I didn't emphasize the very abstract side of this ray. The problem is that they lose touch with the practical world. There's a certain type of this ray that loses touch with the practical world and remains always in the world of higher thought, which cannot be applied. And DK said to one third ray type, look, your mind is so full of ideas, you've got so many plans, but you don't do any of them. Why not just choose one and work it all the way through into expression? Okay, so that's a listing of the third ray glamours. Are there any thoughts about these? Any questions? Any recognition? Does anybody recognize this as, being part of your nature? Do you find a problem that you've located in an objective manner by reviewing these glamours?
Michael?
Yes, Brett?
Leslie says, too busy to comment.
Yeah, okay. I understand. Exactly. A little irony there and humor. It's true. It's true. How often, the old saying, and it's such a good one, be still and know that I am God. Well, the second ray type is good with stillness, but the third ray type has to create in the integration formula the silence of the mill pond, the silence and stillness of the mill pond. And when you think about it, some of you have read The Light of the Soul, and you know about the Patanjali Sutras, and when the mind is constantly in waves and, little disturbances, it does not reflect the integrated picture of the sun, which is the soul. The sun is all broken up and fragmented because of the disturbances in the mental field and also, of course, the astral field. So, being able to be still and calm the waters, calm the reflective power of the mind, it might just be able to bring through an integrated picture of the sun instead of a broken up picture, and that will be the soul, and that will be the mind held steady in the light. So some of the very first things in the Yoga Sutras are learning how to still the mind. And if we can still it for a certain number of seconds, it has been said, well, we actually achieve contemplation. Other
Michael, I was just...
Yes, Tuija, go ahead, please.
Yes, I was just thinking about that in relationship exactly with the glamours of the third ray and Leo states where the concentration is built up. How important is that Leo states as well when the mind has to be developed into the grip of the soul. That it will stay in one point.
Well,
because
concentration.
If that point, concentration.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, when we think about the concentration, meditation, and intuition. So it is a crucial point, this Leo states. And it is related to the sun because Leo is ruled by the sun.
Very much so. And Leo is related to illumination. Obviously. It says there's two types of will connected with Leo. One is the will to rule, and the other is the will to illumine. So, there's lots of different ways of dealing with Leo, but it certainly does begin to focus the mind at a particular point and calm down the disturbance which prevents us from registering the higher energies. So indeed it is involved. Okay, thank you. Any other thoughts about these third ray glamours? I don't know how many people. It's been said. Now, very, very interesting. DK said that at this time in human history, the majority of human beings have either third ray or sixth ray personalities. Now we might say, oh, well, not I. I mean, I'm not that one. and there's nothing wrong with having a third-rate or sixth-rate personality. As a matter of fact, the majority of disciples that the Tibetan was training in his group of 50 or whatever it was, the majority had sixth-rate personalities. Very interesting. But, looking at humanity as a whole, he has said majority now have third-rate or sixth-rate. And then, remember, he said it's the third-rate and the sixth-rate which are most prone to glamour. We read that over the last couple of times. The second-rate type is prone to all the glamours, in general, and we read the type of glamours that each is prone towards. But that gives us an idea that glamour really is a world problem. If the majority of people in the world are third or sixth-rate personalities, and the third or sixth-rate are the two rays most prone to glamour. Anyway, we're going to do what we can to help clear this up. Just a little drop in the bucket, but let's to help. Anything else, Brett, there?
Nothing more right now.
Okay, nothing right now, did you say? I'm sorry. Did you say that?
Correct. Nothing right now.
Nothing right now. Okay, friends. All right, well, look, I just want to say that this is not an easy subject, because you're dealing with things that are oftentimes so habituated, and not just in this life, but over many, many lives, as the Tibetan will tell us. They're so ingrained in our personal response nature that we just take them as present. We don't even notice that we are this way. Like I say, it oftentimes takes a well-meaning, unappreciated person to let us know how we are acting when we don't see it ourselves. The big, who, me? So this is not an easy subject. And we have to keep working upon ourselves while we also try to work upon the larger world situation. Glamour is always based on misidentification. It's always based on identifying as a lower ego in some way, when in fact you are something deeper, broader, wider than that lower ego. That little lower ego standing in the middle of your field of consciousness just distorts thought, emotion, and the higher energies. Just like refraction, you put a stick into the water and suddenly it seems to bend. This has to do with, vision and certain physical properties of water and air and so forth. But that bend is not real. It's just an illusion. Okay. So we have to learn how to see the distortions and the lack of proportion in our own response to things deeply ingrained in us. And it's going to take years to do this, and maybe we can also be useful in helping the world rid itself of its major distortions, which prevent the Christ, who is the soul, from reappearing. A certain amount of this glamorous clearing has to occur. There are many, many requirements. The Christ knows when he will reappear. He's got a certain standard, and what has to be done. The church has to clean house. There has to be a measure of sharing. There has to be a measure of peace. All these things, the glamour of war, the glamour of acquisitiveness, the certain hidden physical instinctual glamours which have affected the religious bodies of our world. All these things have to be cleared up to a degree. Okay, before we get on to the meditation, are there any thoughts or comments that you would like to make before we move on? We'll be working every Friday along these lines, and the book is profound, and we'll find different sections that we can think about together, and that you can question or comment upon, and we'll slowly make progress. Slowly make progress. Okay, anything? Okay. If not, okay, the next time we meet, of course, it'll be the 5 p.m. GMT. Tuija and I will be on the road traveling a bit, and we have a little portable system, and we'll do our best to be continuous and make that little thing work so we can get through to you. You know, we're working behind the scenes. The teaching, DK said, Blavatsky first, Bailey next, and then there would be a revelatory, after 1975, a revelatory teaching going forth over the radio. Well, you know, what radio has become is the huge internet and all that. So before the next great installment of the bridging treatises that DK is responsible for, 3 of them, after 2025 or around 2025 and following, we have to do our so-called revelatory work. We have to spread the teaching far and wide and come together no matter where we may be located in the physically in the world, and help to clarify our own consciousness and the consciousness of other people. And that's our work, and it's occult work, it's esoteric work, and we have to apply ourselves to it. Okay. Well, let's go on then, and now, like I say, I'm going to abbreviate this meditation now. You have copies of it, I hope, and if not, Brett, do you have a copy of this meditation? Because what I would like to do is send it out to people on the list if they don't have it.
It's on the Ask Project page too.
Terrific. So, and the Ask Project page, can you kindly put the link in the chat box? It's there, is it? Okay.
I did. It's there.
Fantastic. Okay, well then you know where to go for this. And now we're just going to begin in a simpler way to do what DK is suggesting. So the very first phase is preparation, but I'm not going to go through specifically what he said about preparation. I'm going to get into the technique and formula, just a little bit of alignment work. So let me just check something out here for just a second. I want to just, yeah. I'm just running down the list of those that are present today. Okay. So, gathering our soul nature, you know, the soul in incarnation, out of the personality identification, we become the observer of the quieted personality fields. And there is a connection here between this integrating personality, the quieted mind, emotions, and physical nature, and the soul. We'll use the creative imagination, just work for a little bit, sensing through the creative imagination the alignment of you as a personality, you as the soul and incarnation with the higher part of yourself here, you on the higher mental plane. It's as if you're in, you know, two places at the same time, which is actually partially true. So there is an alignment between yourself as the integrating personality with its quieted vehicles, to will, to dare, to will, to know, to dare, and to be silent. The monad wills, the soul knows, the personality dares, and the vehicles of the personality are to be silent. So in this state, we use the creative imagination. We have visualized the egoic lotus, the presence of an aspect of the solar angel within the egoic lotus. The soul is the source of light and power in the three worlds, and it is at this time going to interact with what we have gathered on the plane of mind. The light of the personality we draw up, the light of the vehicles, up to the mental plane, mental body, the light of the mind in the mental vehicle, two forms of light, and the light of the soul we draw down. Okay, now the soul is going to imaginatively, from our perspective, sound an Om. So we're going to visualize the soul breathing out the Om into the mind of the attentive, waiting personality. Let us visualize that, and we'll sound the Om inwardly as we visualize the soul breathing the Om into the mind of the attentive personality. That Om is a very powerful thing in this kind of work and all through the esoteric work. So there is light and power now. It's on the mental plane. So this light and power of the soul is going to be held positively within our personality on the plane of mind. We have the two lights of the personality, the light of the vehicles, and also the light of the mind, and then the light and power of the soul. It's focused on the mental plane. Visualize that, this triple light. An intense light visualized on the mental plane. It's a searchlight, really. As DK says, of great brilliance and strength. We visualize that. As if it is a vivid sphere. A sphere of vivid, brilliant light, not yet radiating or projecting, but there on the mental plane. The light of matter, the light of mind, and the light of the soul. Now we're going to put all the will we have behind the light. And this will is going to help us create a real fusion of these three lights. So summon what you know to be your will. Focus it as if behind or in connection with this triple light, and it really causes the fusion of the three lights. I will fuse these three lights into one. And Patanjali is calling this the stage of the mind held steady in the light. Its soul, personality, will. But it's more quiescent at this moment. It's not projecting outwards. Now, we're going to bring together the searchlight of the mind and the glamour that you're working on, the glamour to be dissipated. You're going to bring them together through the power of thought. We're going to recognize that glamour that we're working on, and the searchlight and the power of the searchlight are recognized to be what they are. And we think through what we're trying to do, which is to dissipate this glamour. So we've got this intense searchlight, we think about it, and we've got that glamour out there on the astral plane for the time being. And we think through what we're trying to do. We don't want to strengthen that glamour. He tells us we can't do it in such a way that strengthens the glamour. It's got to be done in such a way that the glamour will be weakened, eventually dissipated, banished. We have to realize our objective here. Now we have achieved necessary concentration, realization, and we understand the relationship somewhat between the light that we are generating and that glamour. So we're going to turn on the searchlight. It's done by an act of the will and the creative imagination, and we're going to see a vivid beam of light stretching forth and piercing the glamour a broad, brilliant beam pouring forth from the illumined mind onto the astral plane. We visualize it and we believe that it is happening. Now we're going to intensify our work with the creative imagination, and we're going to name the glamour as we see it in the process of dissipation. We hold our point of tension. We hold our will. Focused, immovable will is a point of tension. We have the broad beam having pierced the glamour. And now, from a point of tension, you can say this to yourself or inaudibly, however, and you keep visualizing the piercing and the dissipating. The power of the light prevents the appearance of the glamour of, and you name it, power of the light prevents the appearance. The power of the light negates the quality of the glamour from affecting me. I'm not affected by any of those things associated with this glamour. The power of the light destroys the life behind the glamour. The vitality that is embodying this glamour is destroyed. the appearance, the quality, and the life. And then when the life goes, the glamour is going to weaken, die of attrition, be easily dispersed. All this is done at a point of tension with a vivid and accurate use of the creative imagination. So we're going to sound the Om this time in an act of penetration. Sound the Om quietly and produce certain effects as we sustain the visualization. A definite impact upon the glamour has been made. The Om will penetrate the glamour and be absorbed by it. Om. And the absorbed Om on the beam of light will be seen as dissipating the glamour, weakening it until it disappears altogether. Om. And the sun of reality can shine through where the clouds of glamour once veiled it. Now together, we imagine that we withdraw the beam, bring it back onto the mental plane. We withdraw from the astral plane back onto the mental plane. And you can see now that you could work on a daily basis, even just short time, focusing the triple light, naming the glamour, engaging the beam with the glamour, seeing it not appearing, seeing its quality not appearing, seeing its life destroyed. The Om will penetrate the glamour and dissipate it. You see how you could work at this once you get the hang of it relatively swiftly on the particular glamour that you are dealing with. And eventually our vision will clarify and we'll be in a position to participate in more and more of reality. A final Om. Om. Okay, thank you. Now, is there anything that anybody would like to say, comment upon, ask, question, etc.? Looks like a question has popped up
Yes.
there. Yep.
Yes, it has, from Rebecca.
Hmm.
Hello, Michael and Tuija. I have been coming away from the meditations feeling refreshed and clear, but later in the week, a negativity creeps in, sometimes the very glamour I have dissipated. Now, I understand this takes repetition. What is an example of inadvertently strengthening a glamour? This is quite crucial, for it applies to other meditation work. Example, the Ask Project, using the creative imagination. It's often a question that is posited around sending light to so-called dark forces. One can inadvertently enliven. How does one not enliven?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Some thoughts. Of course, we don't send light to dark forces, in a way and I know you don't mean that, we penetrate and watch the dissipation. But I just want to say one thing. There's the point of tension that has to be held. If we relax our point of tension, fed by the soul and the other energies of the personality, we become vulnerable. Another thing I want to recommend is the sevenfold wheel of divine love or fire that he recommended for Assagioli. You stand in the center, you notice the 7 rays, and the 7 rays banish the darkness. You use that as protection. You don't use it to build a shell in the old theosophical sense. I wonder if anybody else has something to say, maybe I could find the sevenfold wheel, or I don't know, Brett, if you have a copy of it any place, I don't know. I have it in my Alice Bailey extracts, and we should all have it, because this is a means of protection. And it's, I'm just going to, hopefully, I'm going to look up the word wheel, the wheel of living fire that burns. Here it is. Okay. Now this is the wheel of protection that you can use. And where is it found, in case, it's found on page Dyna 156 in the instructions to Roberto Assagioli. I would ask you, as far as you possibly can, to insulate yourself from fear. It's a big glamour of the second ray, right? And from the effect of the world situation and its allied problems. The future for you is planned, and you can take the right steps through the power of your illumined mind. And now this man was an initiate, By the time his life was over, he had taken the 3rd degree. I would ask you to carry forward this insulation along the line of love, using the ancient method which has been called the wheel of living fire, which burns not, but ever heals. This method is occult and safe, and constitutes no barrier to relationship, as does the building of a separative wall, which is one of the old theosophical methods. You build that wall around you, you can't be touched, but this is better. And the method is as follows. See before you a wheel of fire with 7 spokes. Those are going to be the 7 rays, right? See it immediately before your eyes. Then, by an act of the creative imagination, see yourself standing in the center of the hub of the wheel. There, regard yourself as if you were that hub. You are the spirit, really. From that central position, send out the 7 streams of living love radiating upon the world. When you do this, you serve, and are at the same time completely protected. This exercise can become instantaneous and effective, and it generates a protective force, and at the same time makes you a living center of light and love. So when later in the week, you feel vulnerable to the very glamour that you were succeeding in dissipating, and it does take a while, then you use this wheel of living fire, which burns not but ever heals. Dyna 1, page 156. I wonder, what I can do? I'm going to copy this thing, and I don't know what the chat box will allow, but I'm going to put it in the chat box. How much, I guess, is there? Well, it didn't allow me too much. Oh, or did it? See if you
Can you, Michael, attach the file?
Well, I'm not very good at that. We've been having trouble with it. Maybe I could. Yeah, there's a place that says handouts. Oh God. Well, anyway, I think you can now copy what's in this. You can copy what's here, at least to start out, and then we'll try to figure out a way to do this. I don't know, Tuija, what I can do right now about attaching it. Maybe Brett, if I send it to you, you think you can do something with it?
Well, while you are doing, Michael, that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please go ahead. Yeah.
That was a very good question, and we have been sometimes talking. We actually could have a webinar over that kind of issues. Something what is good also us to technically understand about what happens when we meditate. When at the same time there is formed the vortex from above, so we become the transmitters for the higher energies. Also us become the higher energy in relationship, or higher life in relationship to the lower lives, which are the elemental lives. And there happens this kind of natural pull up from the lower lives towards the higher lives when there is this kind of focus of transmuting, transforming, transfiguring.
Transfiguring,
and,
yeah.
Yes. So what are our senses is very important to study in this kind of from observer states, but that is the work what we must do as well. So we have to transform these lower lives, and we very seldom, I think, talk about this technical part, how the lower lives are transformed. And when we come in rapport with this process, we might sense that as a fear. And then in that whole realm of consciousness, what those lower lives are representing is related, of course, to the Black Lords in one end. And in that sense, the old saying for the protection of the warrior is about to be the sun, as is the seven spokes of wheel of protection is, that you become the source of radiating light, that nothing can attach to you. This is the principle. So, but anyway, I think we should have a particular webinar about these issues that we would technically talk about.
Okay, well that's a good idea. I have sent Rebecca that to your email, but I've also sent it to Brett, and I don't know.
I got it in the chat box.
It's in the chat box now, so people can copy it. And
yes, they can.
There's also another way for handouts, but I don't know if we've figured out how to do that yet in a flawless manner. Because it did seem to do you have the whole thing in the chat box, Brett? Because mine got cut off. Mine got cut off at a certain point. But anyway, go to 156 in Dyno 1. We should all. I really want to make a plug for this, that you would have the Alice Bailey CD-ROM, which is a powerful tool for study. Maybe it costs somewhat over $100. Maybe it costs $150. I'm not sure, but it's a huge, wonderful tool and a great investment. You know, you can get it from any of the headquarters groups, and it can be mailed to you. It is worth its weight in gold when it comes to these things. Okay, so any other questions or comments before we call it a day? You can see it's a long-term project. Okay.
Michael, one point relating to the question was also that what is good to realize that the more we work and start to function as a group, the more we are going to also realize what it does upon us, because we are the workers. It's the same way when we think about the building the house. It's nice to look the scenery and it's nice to dream about it, but when we actually start to work, we are not always refreshed and we are not always feeling great, because we feel also this distress, and in our emotional field we purify these things. So in one sense it is only good sign when we start to get the real sense of the work.
True, very true. You know, let's just say the disciple treads the thorny path of occultism. That's one image, and is the battle-scarred warrior. That's another image. It's all very kind of Scorpio and Mars kind of thing. And remember that Scorpio is the sign that rules the entire human hierarchy of monads, and Scorpio, in addition, is the sign of discipleship, intense sign of discipleship. So we have to be ready for that. It is the long term. Good, everybody. So if there's not any more questions or comments, try working on these issues yourself. Try even the abbreviated form of this formula. Let's get ourselves into shape so we can be useful in the world. But of course, now I want to say this, that even though we're not yet working on the group and world glamour, somehow we are. Because as you go out there on the astral plane, you know, in your imagination, out there in there, and you are working on a particular glamour, it's going to not only have an effect in your own life, but on the astral plane where so many people are affected. So we're already doing the preliminary work of the next technique. Yeah.
Michael?
Yes, Brett.
Rebecca just comments, thank you very much. That's brilliant.
Okay, excellent. Very good. We've got something going. That sevenfold wheel is really useful. Now, friends, let's do the great invocation together. Just put yourself on self-mute. And maybe, I'll tell you what, Tuija, can I ask you to do this? And I'll put myself on mute so we don't echo. Are you there?
I just tried to take
No,
the
it's right there.
box
It's right there in front of the...
Okay, no, it was because I was putting one box
Okay.
for the question. Okay.
You go ahead and do this invocation.
From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center, where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wheels of men. The purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, our next meeting for Glamour is on the 1st of July, and you can keep using the same link for the next 3 times. I just wanted to experiment with it and make sure that it would really work. It appears to be working. It'll be a PM meeting, GMT, and then the next AM and the next PM, and then I'll give you a new range of a new link for a new range of 5 or 10 or whatever. We'll see. And if we ever have a problem where we cannot do the meditation for some reason, as sometimes happens, we'll contact you through the constant contact list. We have to make sure, Brett, that everybody that's in these groups is on the constant contact list. So we will check the webinar schedule and make sure that we have your email address so that you can be reached through the Moria Federation Constant Contact. Okay, friends, thank you very much for your participation. Let's continue our focus. Please do read in the Glamour a World Problem book. It's a wonderful book, and we will become properly informed and skillful in this subject. So for now, farewell and all the best to all of you. Take care and bye-bye.